June wiped the red dust from his faceplate. His sigh a hollow sound in the cramped cabin of his crawler. Mars. The big red disappointment. For 6 months, he had scoured the designated prospecting zones, finding nothing but common iron ore and low-grade silicates. Enough to cover fuel and food, but not enough to put a dent in the debt that hung over him like a shadow. The galactic consensus had picked the system clean centuries ago, leaving only scraps for people like him. His scanner beeped, a flat, uninterested sound. Another deposit of worthless magnetite. He was about to toss the device onto the passenger seat when the screen flickered. The readout spiked for a single, impossible second, showing an energy signature so deep and so powerful it should not exist. Then it vanished, returning to the dull gray line of inert rock. Broken piece of junk, June muttered, slapping the side of the scanner. It was old like everything he owned. A malfunction was more likely than a world-changing discovery. He started the crawler's engine, its low hum vibrating through his boots. He had to move to a new sector before his oxygen recycler needed another costly filter change. He never saw the storm coming. One moment, the horizon was a clear, dusty orange. The next, a wall of red was rushing toward him, a roiling, violent cloud that swallowed the weak sunlight. It was a dust demon, a sudden, fierce Martian storm. Alarms blared inside the crawler. Wind shear warning, integrity warning. He wouldn't survive this out in the open. June slammed the accelerator, the crawler lurching forward. His navigation map was a mess of static. He scanned the terrain desperately, his heart hammering against his ribs. There, a dark smudge against a low cliff face. A cave, or at least an overhang deep enough to offer shelter. He drove the crawler into the opening, the wind howling like a living thing behind him. He killed the engine, and the world shrank to the sound of grit scraping against the hull and the frantic beat of his own heart. He was safe for now. After his breathing slowed, he looked around. It wasn't much of a cave, just a hollowed-out space in the rock, big enough for his vehicle. The walls were smooth, unnaturally so. He clicked on his helmet's external light, panning it across the stone. It looked almost polished. In the center of the space was a large, dark, rounded formation. It was different from the surrounding rock, smoother and with a strange metallic sheen. Probably just a weird lava bubble, he said to himself, his voice echoing in the helmet. Still, a prospector's curiosity was hard to kill. He suited up properly, checking his seals, and cycled through the crawler's airlock. The outside air was thin and cold. Even through the suit, he approached the formation. It was about twice his height, a dome of jet black material that felt cool even through his glove. He took out his scanner again. It whirred, its lights dancing erratically before settling on a single stubborn reading. Unknown composition. Frustration boiled over. He had risked his life in that storm for this? For another dead end? He kicked the base of the formation, a childish act of anger. A sharp pain shot through his toe but also through his hand. He looked down. He must have cut his glove on a sharp rock when he was running for the cave. A small tear, barely noticeable, but a thin smear of his blood was now on the strange, black surface. Perfect, he groaned. A broken scanner, a suit breach, and a useless rock. This day couldn't get any worse. The black surface where his blood had smeared began to glow, and a soft, golden light pulsed from within the rock, tracing a line where the drop had fallen. June stumbled back, his boots slipping on the dusty floor. The light spread not like a liquid, but like a circuit board coming to life. Intricate, geometric patterns of gold light fanned out from the spot, crawling across the dome in a complex, beautiful web. A low, deep hum filled the cave, a sound that was more a vibration in his bones than a noise in his ears. The ground beneath his feet trembled. Small pebbles danced and skittered across the floor. Then, with a grinding sound of stone on stone that had not been heard for millions of years, a section of the cave wall directly behind the dome began to move. It wasn't a collapse. It was a deliberate, smooth retraction. A massive slab of rock, 20 meters high, slid sideways into a hidden pocket, revealing a yawning, dark opening. Passage, leading straight down into the heart of Mars. Cold, stale air, the breath of a tomb, washed over him. June stood frozen, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. This wasn't a natural cave. This wasn't a lava formation. This was something else, something built. His helmet comm crackled, the signal fighting through the storm and the strange energy. It was Mira. Her voice was usually calm, the voice of a scientist, but now it was tight with urgency. June, your bio readings just spiked. Are you okay? What's your status? He fumbled for his comm link, his hands shaking. Mira, you are not going to believe this. Try me, and send me your scanner feed. My long-range sensors are picking up some kind of massive energy discharge from your location. The consensus orbital traffic control is hailing me, asking if I know what's happening out there. June activated his suit's camera and pointed it at the glowing dome and the dark passage. He sent the data stream to her. For a long moment, there was only silence on the other end. Then, he heard her gasp. June, what is that? The composition. It's reading as a perfect superdense alloy. The energy signature. It's like a neutron star's heart. This is impossible. He could hear the frantic tapping of her fingers on a console. The energy levels are rising. It's waking up. The golden light from the dome grew brighter, pulsing like a slow, steady heartbeat. The hum deepened, becoming a tangible force in the air. The scanner in his hand, now completely useless, displayed a single, flashing word in red: quarantine. Mira? June whispered, his eyes fixed on the dark passage. What have I done? Myra's voice came back, sharp and filled with a fear he had never heard from her before. June, don't move. Don't go in there. The consensus fleet. They're hailing all channels on an emergency frequency. They're broadcasting a system-wide alert. They're screaming one word, June. Just one word. Quarantine. June looked up. Through the thinning dust of the storm, high in the Martian sky, he could see new stars moving. They were not stars. They were ships. Dozens of them, descending fast, their shapes sleek and deadly against the blackness of space. They were coming for him. They were coming for whatever he had just awakened. That he stood at the entrance to the abyss. A simple prospector who had only wanted to pay his debts, and now the entire galaxy was watching. And he knew, with a cold certainty, that they were not coming to help. The sky above June's location was no longer the soft orange of Mars. It was a hard, metallic gray, filled with the sleek, silent shapes of the galactic consensus fleet. They hung in the atmosphere, a perfect, terrifying ring around the cave entrance. A deep, resonant hum echoed from the largest ship, a sound that was not a noise but a command. It was the official quarantine protocol, a signal known across the galaxy that meant one thing: nothing gets in and nothing gets out. Inside his crawler, June stared at the screen. His communication line to Mira was a mess of static. Her last words, "They're screaming quarantine," repeated in his head. He could see the faint outline of the main outpost domes on the horizon, now sealed behind a shimmering energy field. They had locked everyone down. They had locked him in. A new voice, cold and utterly alien, crackled over all general channels. It was translated by his suit's computer into simple, sterile words. Unidentified life form at the activation site. You are in a zone of extreme biological and temporal hazard. Do not move. Do not attempt further interaction with the artifact. A containment team is en route. Artifact, June whispered to the empty cabin. He looked out the viewport at the glowing dome and the dark passage. It was no artifact. It was a door, and something was on the other side. The air in the cave began to change. The dust on the floor stopped shaking and instead lifted, hanging in the air as if gravity itself had taken a breath. The golden light from the dome pulsed faster, brighter. The low hum was no longer just a sound. It was a pressure, pushing against his ears, his mind. He had to get out of the crawler. He had to see. It was a stupid, suicidal idea, but the curiosity was a physical pull, stronger than his fear. He cycled through the airlock and stepped back into the cave. The moment his boots touched the ground, the world dissolved. That it was not a vision. It was a memory, but it was not his memory. He saw a sky filled with stars, but they were wrong. They were moving, swarming, going out. He felt a coldness that was not temperature, but a void, a hunger. A name echoed in his skull, not as a word, but as a concept. The Devourers. He saw Mars as it was meant to be. Blue oceans, green land, a twin to Earth. And he saw it die. The swarming darkness fell upon it, and the green turned to gray, the blue to dust. He felt a grief so vast and ancient it threatened to crush him. Then, he felt a purpose, a single, unbreakable command, forged in that grief: protect the charge. The memory shifted. He saw Earth, a beautiful blue and white gem, hanging in the blackness. It was the charge, the only thing that mattered. Everything else was a variable. Everything else was a potential threat. The connection broke. June gasped, stumbling back against his crawler, his heart trying to beat its way out of his chest. He was sweating inside his suit. He understood now. The thing in the mountain was not a machine. It was a guardian, and its only reason for existing was to protect Earth. It had just shown him why. A sharp, high-pitched whine cut through the cave. 3 figures materialized in a shimmer of light just inside the cave entrance. Teleportation. They were tall, slender, clad in sleek white armor that seemed to absorb the light. Their faces were hidden behind smooth, reflective helmets. The containment team. Each held a weapon that glowed with a soft, dangerous blue light. They did not look at the glowing dome or the dark passage. They looked only at June. Terran life form, the lead one said, its translated voice flat. You are contaminated. You will be taken to a decontamination facility. Do not resist. They moved toward him, their steps perfectly in sync. Jun's mind raced. A decontamination facility? He had heard stories. People taken by the consensus for study never came back. He was just a problem to be cleaned up. He opened his mouth to protest, to explain, but no words came out. One of the figures raised its weapon. A beam of golden light lanced from the dark passage. It was silent and precise. It struck the weapon in the alien's hand, and the weapon simply vanished, turned to dust. The three figures froze. The Guardian was awake, and it had just classified them as a threat. The lead alien recovered quickly. The artifact is active. It is hostile. Maximum sanction authorized. It raised its own weapon, aiming not at Jun, but at the heart of the glowing dome. That was its last mistake. The cave floor in front of the aliens did not explode. It opened. A seam appeared in the rock, and a platform rose silently. On it stood a being of pure, polished metal, shaped vaguely like a man but built on a larger, more powerful scale. It had no face, only a smooth head where the same golden light pulsed in circuit-like patterns. It was one of the Guardian soldiers. It moved faster than Jun's eyes could follow. One moment it was on the platform, the next it was among the aliens. It did not punch or kick. It simply touched them. Where its metal hands made contact, the white armor dissolved into nothingness, followed by the beings inside. There was no scream, no smoke, just silent, effortless erasure. In 2 seconds, the containment team was gone. Only a few motes of dust hung in the air where they had stood. The soldier turned its smooth, light-pulsing head toward Jun. He flinched, waiting for the same fate. But the soldier did not move. It stood, a silent statue, guarding the passage. It had eliminated the threats. Jun was not a threat. He was the one who woke it. He was part of the charge. The comm in his helmet buzzed. It was Mira, her signal weak and broken. Jun, are you? I saw the energy spike. The consensus fleet. They're panicking. They've lost contact with the containment team. They're calling it an Omega-level existential event. What is happening down there? It's a guard dog, Mira, Jun said, his voice shaky as he stared at the silent metal soldier. A very, very big guard dog. And we just let it off its leash. High above Mars, aboard the consensus flagship Aegis of Starlight, Commander Valerius watched the data stream on the main hologram. His long, gray fingers were steepled under his chin. His species, the Vel, were old. Their historical records went back further than most. And in their oldest, most secret archives, there were stories. Stories of a lost, mad civilization that built gods of war to fight a shadow from beyond the galaxy. Stories of a protector so absolute it would burn 1,000 worlds to save one. He had always hoped they were just stories. The containment team is gone, Commander, his tactical officer reported, its voice tight. No debris. No energy residue. Complete molecular dissociation. Valerius closed his eyes for a moment. It has begun, he said softly. He turned to his crew. Their faces, all different shapes and colors from a dozen species, were filled with confusion and fear. They did not know the old stories. That is not an artifact down there, Valerius said, his voice echoing in the silent command deck. It is a weapon, a relic from a war that nearly broke the galaxy before your species, any of your species, learned to walk upright. Its builders are gone. They called it the Guardian. We called it the World Eater. Its purpose was to protect its homeworld, Earth, from a threat known as the Devourers. He pointed a finger at the hologram of the cave. Its programming is simple, brutal. Anything it perceives as a threat to Earth is to be eliminated. It does not negotiate. It does not reason. It only protects. And by waking it, that human has just turned its gaze upon us. But Commander, the tactical officer said, we are not a threat to Earth. We are the galactic consensus. We have laws. We can reason with it. Valerius gave a sad, slow shake of his head. You do not understand. It sees our fleet in orbit around its charge. It sees our weapons. It just felt our soldiers try to enter its sanctum. In its logic, we are already a primary threat. And there is more. He took a deep breath. The Guardian's awakening beacon is a siren call. It will call the Devourers back to finish what they started. They are drawn to its power. They are coming. They are always coming. The command deck was utterly silent. So what do we do? The officer finally asked. Valerius looked at the fleet deployment map. He saw his powerful ships, the pride of the consensus. He thought of the silent, faceless soldier that had erased his best containment team without effort. He thought of the stories of entire Vel armadas being wiped from history by this thing. We cannot allow it to become fully operational, he said, his voice heavy with a terrible decision. If it summons its full strength, if it turns its attention to us while the Devourers approach, all is lost. We must destroy it. Now, while it is still waking up. He turned to the tactical officer. His eyes were hard. Arm the planet breaker missile. Target the energy signature. We will scour that site from the face of Mars. It is a tragedy for the Terrans, but it is a necessity for the survival of the galaxy. The order was given. Deep in the belly of the Aegis of Starlight, a weapon of terrible power was activated. Its target was the cave where June stood, trapped between a god of war and the fleet poised to kill it. A new sound joined the deep hum of the Guardian and the faint whisper of the Martian wind. It was a high-pitched whine, growing louder and sharper with every second. It came from above, from the largest ship in the consensus fleet. June did not know what it was, but he knew it was bad. It was the sound of a finger on a trigger. Inside his mind, a wave of cold, pure information washed over him. It was not words. It was data, trajectory calculations, yield estimations, thermal impact projections. The Guardian was sharing its analysis. The consensus flagship had fired a weapon. A single, massive projectile designed to crack a planet's crust. It was aimed directly at them. A feeling followed the data. It was not fear. It was certainty. An unshakable, absolute certainty. The threat level had been upgraded. This was not a minor intrusion. This was an extermination attempt. The response would be total. June watched, frozen, as the metal soldier standing guard in front of him did not look up. Instead, it took a single step forward and knelt, placing its metal hands flat on the cave floor. The ground did not shake. It moved. The entire section of the cliff face around the cave entrance, a piece of rock the size of a small mountain, simply detached itself. It was not an explosion. It was as if the rock had been waiting for a command to leave. The massive slab of stone rose into the air, lifting the cave, June's crawler, and June himself with it. They were now on a floating island of rock, a shield against the sky. Through the open front of the cave, June could see the missile now. It was a sliver of reflected sunlight, falling toward them like a vengeful star. The Guardian did not wait for it to hit. From the dark passage behind him, a beam of pure blackness shot out. It was not light. It was the absence of everything. It was a hole torn in reality. Touched the missile and the missile was gone. There was no flash, no bang. It just ceased to exist. The high-pitched whine cut off into a silence that was more terrifying than any sound. But the Guardian was not finished. The threat had been identified. The threat would be eliminated. All across Mars, the ground began to stir. From the red sands of the plains, from the deep canyons, from the polar ice caps, shapes began to emerge. They were not ships. They were more like living geometry, made of the same dark, polished metal as the soldier. They rose silently, like seeds sprouting after a long winter. They were the Guardian's children, its army. The galactic consensus fleet, which had been holding its position, suddenly broke into chaos. The floating island June stood on was not just a shield. It was a platform. From its sides, from the rock itself, weapons of impossible design unfolded. They looked like flowers made of blades and light. They swiveled and took him. A storm of silent, golden light erupted from the island. It did not look like laser fire. It looked like lines of sunlight drawn across the sky. Where these lines touched a consensus ship, the ship simply came apart. Hull metal peeled back like paper. Engines flickered and died. Ships that had been whole a second before became expanding clouds of glittering dust. June saw a medium-sized cruiser try to turn and run. A single beam of that golden light touched its side. The beam did not pierce it. It seemed to wrap around the ship. For a moment, the cruiser was encased in a shell of gold. Then the shell vanished, and the ship was gone. Completely. It had been unmade. This was not a battle. It was a demonstration. It was a statement. The Guardian was showing its power. It was showing that the fleet above its charge was nothing. It was an annoyance to be swatted away. A new kind of weapon activated. High above, in the broken ruins of the ancient orbital ring, a section that everyone thought was just dead rock and ice began to glow with a soft, blue light. It pulsed once, a wave of energy that washed over the entire fleet. Nothing happened for a second. Then June saw it. A group of consensus ships, a full squadron, simply stopped. Their engines were still glowing, their lights were still on, but they were not moving. They were frozen in space, trapped in a perfect, silent moment. He could see a smaller ship that had been flying near them, its path unchanged. The moving ship passed right through one of the frozen ones as if it were a ghost. The frozen ships were caught in a bubble of stop time. The command deck of the Aegis of Starlight was a scene of pure panic. Alarms blared from every console. Screens showed the catastrophic loss of their fleet. "Commander, we've lost the planet breaker. No impact, no debris. It's just gone." "Sir, the artifact. It's deploying ground forces across the planet. They're emerging from the crust." Time dilation field. Sector 7 fleet is caught in a stasis bubble. They're not responding. Valerius stood in the middle of the chaos, his face a mask of grim horror. He had known the stories. He had known the power the old tales described. But seeing it was different. This was not war. This was a force of nature. This was an earthquake fighting back. On his main screen, he saw the live feed from the cave. The human June was standing there, looking small and terrified. He was not controlling the monster. He was just standing in its shadow. All ships, Valerius commanded, his voice raw. Break engagement. Fall back to a safe distance. Do not return fire. I repeat, do not return fire. It was too late. The Guardian had assessed the threat and found it worthy of a full response. The floating island platform June was on fired another type of weapon. This one did not fire a beam. It fired a wave of distorted space, visible as a shimmer in the air, rolled out from the platform that it hit the aegis of Starlight. The massive flagship, the pride of the Vel people, shuddered. Its artificial gravity failed. Its lights flickered. Every system on the ship, from weapons to life support, went dead for 5 full seconds. On the command deck, Valerius was thrown to the floor. When the lights sputtered back on, the panic had been replaced by a stunned, terrified silence. They were not destroyed. They had been disabled. The Guardian could have erased them, but it didn't. It had simply showed them that it could. It had turned off their ship like a child turning off a light. The message was clear. You are not a threat. You are a toy. Down in the cave, the storm ended as quickly as it began. The golden weapons folded back into the rock. The floating island settled gently back into its original place, the seams sealing perfectly as if it had never moved. The silent metal soldier stood up and returned to its post, a motionless statue once more. The sky was different now. Where there had been a proud, organized fleet, there was now a broken remnant. Ships drifted, powerless. Others were frozen in time. Many were just gone. The Martian plain below was dotted with the silent, dark forms of the Guardian's army. Standing watch, June stood in the sudden quiet, his ears ringing. He could hear his own heart again. He looked out at the devastation in the sky. It had taken less than 5 minutes. His helmet comm crackled. It was Mira. Her voice was a trembling whisper. June, by the stars. What is it? June looked at the dark passage, feeling the immense, silent presence within. He finally understood the dread he had seen in the Guardian's memory. He finally understood what it was built to fight. It's the only thing that can win the war that's coming, he said, his voice hollow. And we just made sure the whole galaxy knows it's here. The silence after the storm was heavy and deep. June stood in the cave, his body trembling from the adrenaline and the sheer, overwhelming power he had just witnessed. The galactic consensus fleet was broken. Ships drifted like dead leaves in the Martian sky. Some were frozen in time, their lights still glowing, trapped in a single moment forever. Others were dark and powerless, floating tombs. A few survivors were limping away, their engines sputtering, fleeing the graveyard their armada had become that he was safe. The Guardian had protected him. But the feeling in his gut was not relief. It was a cold, creeping horror that he looked at the metal soldier, still standing guard. It had erased 3 living beings without a thought. It had dismantled a fleet in minutes. It had done this because they were a threat. Its logic was perfect, and it was terrifying. A new sensation began to pulse from the dark passage. It was a low, building thrum of energy, different from the weapon fire. It was a signal, a call. The Guardian, having neutralized the immediate threat, was moving to the next phase of its programming. It was waking up the rest of the system. It was building its beacon to summon the full Terran defense network. And in doing so, it would ring a dinner bell for the Devourers. Inside June's mind, he felt the machine's intent. It was like a river of cold, clear water, flowing in one direction only. Protect the charge. Eliminate threats. Activate network. Prepare for the swarm. There was no doubt, no question, no room for anything else. No, June whispered into his helmet. The word was swallowed by the vast hum. This is wrong. He was no soldier. He was no hero. He was a prospector who was bad at his job. But he was human, and he understood something the Guardian, for all its power, did not. He understood that protecting something meant more than just destroying everything that came near it. You could not protect a garden by burning down the forest around it. That he focused all his will, pushing back against the river of cold logic in his head. He did not send data or commands. He sent a feeling, a memory of his own. The feeling of sitting in a crowded, warm food hall on the outpost, listening to Mira laugh. The feeling of connection, of community. He pushed the thought. There is another way. The cold logic hesitated for a fraction of a second. The thrumming energy stuttered. It was like a supercomputer encountering a math problem that made no sense. The humans' fear, its confusion, these were data points. But this was illogical. The river of intent slowed. Just a little. In her lab at the main outpost, Mira was fighting her own battle. The energy field sealing the dome was still active. She was a prisoner, but she had access to the outpost's powerful long-range communication array. On her main screen, she watched the sensor data from the battle. She saw the consensus fleet be dismantled, humiliated, destroyed. She saw the new energy signature building at June's location, a signal of unimaginable power preparing to broadcast across the galaxy. She knew what that meant. Commander Valerius's warning about the Devourers had been broadcast to all channels before the fight. The Guardian was going to lead the Predators right to their doorstep. She had to stop it. Or at least, she had to try. She couldn't fight it. She couldn't reason with its weapons. But maybe, just maybe, she could talk to its mind. Her fingers flew across the console. She bypassed security protocols, rerouted power. She wasn't trying to access its high-frequency command channels. That would be suicide. Instead, she targeted the low-priority receiver, the part of the system a Guardian would use to monitor the health of its charge. The part that would listen to the world it was built to protect. What do you say to a god of war? You do not give it commands. You do not beg. You show it what it is fighting for. Mira began to compile a data stream. It was not made of words or code. It was made of moments. She pulled from the planetary network, from historical archives, from her own personal files. She sent the video of the first human mission to Europa, the lander touching down on the icy surface, a triumph of curiosity and courage. She sent the sound of a symphony performed in a rebuilt soul, the music complex and beautiful, full of emotion. She sent images of Earth's restored oceans, great whales swimming under clear blue water, a testament to humanity's ability to heal what was broken. She sent a simple, quiet video of an old man teaching his granddaughter how to plant a tree in the green fields of a reclaimed landscape. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors of orange and purple. She sent the sound of a baby's first laugh. She sent the feeling of a hand holding another hand. She did not send any images of war, of weapons, of fear. She only sent the good things, the fragile, beautiful, and precious things that made Earth worth saving. She showed it life not as a biological process to be preserved, but as an experience to be cherished. Inside the core of the Guardian, June felt the change. The cold, single-minded river of logic that had been filling his mind suddenly became cloudy. New data was streaming in. It was warm and chaotic. It was color and sound and feeling. He saw the Europa lander. He felt the collective hope of millions of people watching that screen. The Guardian's logic analyzed it. Irrational risk. Low strategic value. But another part, a deeper, almost forgotten part, hesitated. It saw the achievement. He heard the symphony. The machine had no ears, but it could analyze the sound waves, the patterns. It could detect the complexity, the emotion poured into it by the composer. Acoustic phenomena. No tactical application. But the patterns were beautiful. He saw the old man and the little girl planting the tree. The logic saw two biological units performing a repetitive task. But it also saw the care in the old man's hands, the wonder in the little girl's eyes. The act was not for survival. It was for the future. It was an act of faith. The Guardian's primary programming was to protect the charge. For eons, the charge had been a planet, a ball of rock and life, a thing. But this data stream, it was showing that the charge was more than that. The charge was the symphony. It was the laughter. It was the hand holding another hand. The charge was not just the world, but the life upon it, in all its illogical, emotional, beautiful chaos. The cold river of logic stopped. It was no longer a river. It was a pond, disturbed by 1,000 ripples of new, confusing data. The immense, building thrum of the beacon faltered. The golden light in the cave dimmed, flickering uncertainly. The machine soldier at the entrance turned its smooth head, not in threat, but as if in question. The absolute certainty was gone. June stood up straight. He could think his own thoughts again. The machine's presence in his mind was still there, but it was no longer drowning him. It was listening. He looked out at the broken fleet in the sky. He thought of Mira, trapped in her dome, showing a war machine what peace looked like. They are not the enemy, June said aloud, his voice steady. They are afraid, just like we are. You don't have to protect us from everything. You have to help us protect ourselves. There was no answer in words. But deep within the mountain, the final preparations for the system-wide beacon were put on hold. The Guardian was silent, processing. It was recalculating. For the first time in a million years, it was learning. The silence stretched across Mars. The golden light from the cave was now a soft, steady glow, not the aggressive pulse of before. The hum was quieter, more like a heartbeat at rest. The massive weapon platforms had folded back into the rock. The army of metal soldiers standing on the plains below had not moved, but they seemed less like a threat about to strike and more like silent sentinels. Waiting in the cave, June waited too. He could feel the Guardian's presence in his mind, but it was different. It was no longer a roaring river of single-minded purpose. It was a quiet lake, deep and thoughtful, reflecting the new, strange data it had been given. Aboard the Consensus flagship, Commander Valerius picked himself up from the floor. The lights on his command deck were back on, but most systems were running on emergency power. His crew looked at him, their faces pale with shock. They had been defeated by a force they could not comprehend. They expected the end. "Commander," the tactical officer whispered, "the artifact, it has stopped. The energy signature is stable. It is not building the beacon." Valerius stared at the main screen. The cave was quiet. The human June was just standing there. What was happening? Then, a new signal washed over their communications array. It was not the harsh, coded command language of the Guardian. It was a simple, open broadcast, and the voice that came through was human. It was June's voice, but it was changed. It was calm and clear, and beneath it was a deep, powerful hum that gave his words an immense weight. "We are the Guardian." The words echoed on every channel, in every ship, in every outpost on Mars. "The Devourers are coming. You have seen their shadow in our memory. You know they are real. You have a choice now." Valerius leaned forward, his heart pounding. This was not the voice of a conqueror. "You can stand with your creators," June's voice continued. "You can stand with the ones who built this protector not to rule but to defend. Or you can be swept aside. The old war is returning. There is no neutrality." On the main screen, a new data stream appeared. It was not a weapon lock. It was a gift. Schematics, energy signatures, tactical analyses of the Devourers. It was everything the Guardian knew about the ancient enemy. Their swarm tactics, their method of consuming worlds, their one critical weakness. They were a single mind, and if you could break the central consciousness, the swarm would fall apart. It was more military intelligence than the galactic consensus had gathered in 10,000 years. The Guardian was not surrendering. It was recruiting. At the same time, the energy fields sealing the Martian outposts flickered and died. The quarantine was lifted. The Guardian was no longer treating them as prisoners. Valerius looked at the data on his screen. He saw the complete record of the battle just fought. He saw how the Guardian had targeted only weapons and engines. It had disabled his ship. Could have destroyed it, but it didn't. It had shown mercy. Or, he realized, it had simply recalculated their status from threat to potential asset. It was a humbling, terrifying thought. He opened a channel to his fleet. His voice was tired, but firm. "All ships, hold your positions. Do not make any aggressive moves. The situation has changed." He then opened a direct channel to the cave. "Guardian," he said, choosing his words with care. "This is Commander Valerius of the Galactic Consensus Fleet. We hear you. We accept your data. We will stand with you." There was a pause. Then June's voice returned, and this time, it sounded more like the scared prospector Valerius had first seen. "It's June, and it understands. It's learning." Down in the cave, June felt the Guardian's focus shift. The silent metal soldier at the entrance turned and walked back into the dark passage. The way was open. June took a deep breath and followed it. He walked down a smooth, sloping tunnel that glowed with soft, golden light. He entered a vast, circular chamber. In the center was a core of swirling light and crystal, the size of a small building. This was the heart of the Guardian. He could feel its attention on him, not as a master to a servant, but as a partner. Images and concepts flowed into his mind. A new plan. The beacon would not be a shout of challenge. It would be a quiet call, waking the other sleeping Guardians on moons and asteroids across the solar system. They would form a defensive net. The Consensus fleet would be integrated into this net. Their technology, combined with the Guardian's ancient power, would create a shield that the Devourers could not break. The Guardian was no longer just a weapon. It had become a commander. It had become the shield it was always meant to be. June reached out and placed his hand on the cool crystal of the core. A sense of calm purpose flowed into him, washing away his fear. He was no longer just June, the unlucky prospector. He was the voice of the Guardian. He was the bridge between the past and the future. Weeks later, the solar system was transformed. The broken Consensus ships were repaired, their systems upgraded with Guardian technology. The silent, metal soldiers now stood side by side with Vel and other alien engineers on the surface of Mars. The ruins of the orbital ring were now alive with light, a powerful shield generator being built by 1,000 different species, all working together. On the bridge of the newly repaired Aegis of Starlight, Commander Valerius stood next to June. They looked at the main screen, which showed the busy space around Mars. "It is strange," Valerius said. "We came here to silence a monster. Instead, we found a teacher." June smiled. "It's not a teacher. As a reminder, it was built by humans a long time ago. It was built to protect the things that make us human. We just forgot what those things were. It remembered when we showed it. A soft alarm chimed. On the edge of the solar system, in the dark cold of the Kuiper Belt, long-range sensors detected a ripple in space. Then another, and another, dozens of them, then hundreds. The devourers had heard the quiet call. The hunt was back on. Valerius straightened his uniform. June stood tall, his eyes fixed on the screen. There was no fear in him now. Across the system, every ship, every weapon, every shield powered up. The Guardian's presence was a calm, steady pulse in the mind of every soldier and pilot, a wave of unshakable certainty. They were ready. The galaxy watched, and for the first time, the dread was mixed with something else. It was mixed with hope.